If you're drinking coffee every single morning, but your hair is getting thinner, weaker, or shedding faster than it used to, this video is for you, because what you add to your coffee can either silently accelerate hair loss or help protect your hair follicles from the inside out. Today we're talking about cinnamon. Yes, this common spice, when used correctly in coffee, can have a powerful impact on circulation, blood sugar balance, inflammation, and nutrient delivery to the scalp. Four major factors directly tied to hair loss. Hair loss does not begin on your scalp. It begins silently inside your body, long before the mirror ever shows you thinning hair, widening parts, or strands collecting in the shower drain. And this is where most people get it wrong. They chase shampoos, oils, serums, and supplements, never realizing that hair follicles are not cosmetic structures. They are metabolic organs. They respond to blood flow, hormones, inflammation, and cellular stress faster than almost any other tissue in the body. One of the earliest internal triggers of hair loss is impaired circulation. Hair follicles are among the most blood-hungry structures you have. Each follicle depends on tiny capillaries to deliver oxygen, amino acids, iron, zinc, and B vitamins. When circulation slows, even slightly, the follicle begins to shrink. Research published in the Journal of Dermatology shows that reduced scalp microcirculation directly correlates with follicle miniaturization, shorter growth phases, and accelerated shedding. Cinnamon contains bioactive compounds such as cinnamaldehyde that have been shown to improve peripheral blood flow by relaxing blood vessel walls. Better blood flow means follicles are fed again, not starved. But circulation is only the first layer of the problem. Blood sugar instability is one of the most underestimated causes of hair loss in modern adults. Every spike in blood glucose triggers a surge in insulin. Elevated insulin increases androgen activity, particularly dihydrotestosterone or DHT, the hormone most strongly linked to follicle shrinkage and pattern hair loss. A study in the journal Diabetes Care confirmed that insulin resistance significantly increases androgen signaling. Cinnamon has been repeatedly shown in clinical studies to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce fasting glucose, and blunt post-meal blood sugar spikes. When insulin stabilizes, the hormonal assault on hair follicles begins to quiet. And then there is cortisol, the stress hormone silently thinning your hair while you think you're just busy. Chronically elevated cortisol forces hair follicles into the telogene or resting phase. This is why people experience massive shedding after periods of stress, illness, or sleep deprivation. Research published in the American Journal of Physiology demonstrates that cortisol suppresses hair follicle stem cell activity, slowing regeneration. Cinnamon has been shown to lower cortisol response by moderating sympathetic nervous system activation. In simpler terms, it helps your body calm down at a hormonal level, giving follicles permission to grow again. Inflammation is another hidden driver. Chronic low-grade inflammation damages the delicate stem cells that control hair cycling. Elevated inflammatory cytokines shorten the anagen, or growth phase, and accelerate follicle aging. Studies in the journal Nutrients show that cinnamon polyphenols significantly reduce inflammatory markers such as TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. Lower inflammation creates a biological environment where follicles can stay active longer instead of shutting down early. Oxidative stress is equally destructive. Hair follicles produce keratin at an extremely rapid rate, which makes them highly vulnerable to free radical damage. Oxidative stress damages follicular DNA, weakens the hair shaft, and accelerates graying and thinning. Cinnamon ranks among the highest antioxidant spices measured by ORAC value. Antioxidants neutralize free radicals before they damage follicle cells. This is not cosmetic protection, it is cellular defense. What makes this even more important is how these factors stack together. Poor circulation worsens insulin resistance. Insulin resistance increases inflammation. Inflammation raises cortisol. Cortisol suppresses follicle regeneration. This cascade doesn't happen overnight, but once it starts, hair loss accelerates rapidly. Cinnamon interrupts this cascade at multiple points simultaneously. Few natural compounds do that. Now here's the shocking part most people never hear. Hair follicles are not programmed to fail with age. Studies on centenarians with full hair density show preserved circulation, low inflammation, stable glucose metabolism, and reduced oxidative stress. Hair loss is not inevitable. It is metabolic, and metabolic signals can be changed. When researchers examine scalp biopsies from people with thinning hair, they consistently find reduced oxygenation, increased inflammatory markers, and impaired glucose uptake in follicle cells. Cinnamon directly addresses all three. This is why its impact is not immediate but cumulative. It restores internal conditions follicles require to survive. This is also why topical treatments often fail. You cannot override internal metabolic damage with surface-level solutions. Hair follicles respond to blood chemistry, not marketing claims. And this explains why people often notice reduced shedding before they see regrowth. When the internal stress signals decrease, follicles stop abandoning the growth cycle. Shedding slows first, thickness follows later. The science is clear on one thing. Hair loss accelerates when the body perceives danger. High blood sugar signals chaos. High cortisol signals threat. Inflammation signals injury. Poor circulation signals scarcity. Cinnamon sends the opposite message. It signals stability, safety, and supply. And when the body feels safe, it grows hair. This is not folklore. This is biochemistry. This is endocrinology. This is cellular signaling. Hair does not respond to hope. It responds to physiology. And when you change the internal environment, when circulation improves, hormones stabilize, inflammation drops, and oxidative stress decreases, the scalp stops being a battlefield and becomes fertile ground again. That is why something as small as cinnamon, when used consistently, can have an outsized impact. Not because it stimulates hair, but because it removes the conditions that are killing it. Hair loss is not random, it is a message. And cinnamon helps you answer it at the root. Coffee is one of the most consumed substances on earth. But what most people never realize is that for millions of adults, coffee is quietly accelerating hair loss every single morning. Not because coffee is evil, but because of what caffeine does to stress hormones, blood sugar, and nutrient depletion when it enters the body alone. And this is where cinnamon completely changes the story. When caffeine hits your system, it immediately stimulates the adrenal glands. This causes a rapid release of cortisol and adrenaline. In the short term, this feels like energy. In the long term, it's a biological stress alarm. Studies published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology show that repeated cortisol spikes disrupt the hair growth cycle by pushing follicles prematurely into the resting phase. This is why chronic coffee drinkers under stress often experience diffuse shedding rather than bald patches. Hair is being told to stop growing, not because of age, but because the body feels under threat. Caffeine also spikes blood glucose, especially when consumed on an empty stomach. This leads to a surge in insulin. Elevated insulin doesn't just affect metabolism, it increases androgen signaling, including DHT activity. Research confirms that insulin resistance intensifies androgen sensitivity in hair follicles, accelerating thinning in genetically vulnerable individuals. In other words, your morning coffee can amplify the very hormonal signals that shrink hair follicles. Now here's the shocking part. Most people drink coffee daily for years without realizing that caffeine also interferes with the absorption of critical hair nutrients, including iron, zinc, magnesium, and B vitamins. Iron deficiency alone is one of the leading causes of hair loss worldwide, especially in women. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that coffee consumed near meals significantly reduces iron absorption. Over time, this creates a silent nutrient deficit, and hair follicles are among the first tissues to shut down when nutrients run low. So, where does cinnamon come in? Cinnamon fundamentally changes how caffeine behaves in the body. Research published in Food and Function shows that cinnamon slows gastric emptying and reduces the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream. This means caffeine is absorbed more gradually, reducing the sharp cortisol and adrenaline spikes that shock the system. Instead of a hormonal roller coaster, the body experiences a smoother, more controlled energy response. Lower cortisol means hair follicles are no longer forced into survival mode. Cinnamon also improves insulin sensitivity. Clinical trials demonstrate that cinnamon enhances glucose uptake in cells, lowering post-caffeine blood sugar spikes. When insulin stabilizes, androgen signaling decreases. This directly reduces the hormonal pressure that shrinks hair follicles over time. But there's more. Caffeine increases oxidative stress by accelerating metabolic reactions. This produces free radicals that damage follicle stem cells and weaken the hair shaft. Cinnamon is one of the most powerful natural antioxidants ever studied. Its polyphenols neutralize free radicals before they damage follicular DNA. This protective effect is not cosmetic, it's cellular preservation. Cinnamon also supports liver function. The liver is responsible for metabolizing excess hormones, including cortisol and estrogen. When the liver is overloaded by caffeine, sugar, or stress, hormones recirculate in the bloodstream longer than they should. Research shows that cinnamon enhances liver enzyme activity involved in detoxification. A more efficient liver means faster hormone clearance, less follicle exposure to stress hormones, and a healthier growth environment. And then there's circulation. Caffeine constricts blood vessels temporarily. This is one reason some people experience cold hands, anxiety, or scalp tightness after coffee. Vasoconstriction reduces blood flow to the scalp, depriving follicles of oxygen. Cinnamon counteracts this effect by promoting vasodilation. Improved blood flow ensures that even with caffeine present, follicles continue receiving nutrients and oxygen. This is why people who add cinnamon to their coffee often report fewer jitters, less anxiety, and more stable energy. And over time, less shedding. It's not placebo, it's physiology. Here's the deeper truth. Hair loss accelerates when the body perceives instability. Caffeine alone screams urgency. Cinnamon whispers balance. When combined, coffee becomes less of a stressor and more of a tool. This combination doesn't just protect hair, it teaches the body how to handle stimulation without panic. And when the nervous system calms, follicles follow. This is why some cultures that traditionally combine coffee with spices show lower rates of stress-related hair thinning. The stimulants were never consumed in isolation. Over weeks of consistent use, cortisol baseline begins to drop. Insulin signaling improves. Nutrient depletion slows. Oxidative damage decreases. Hair follicles stop receiving shutdown signals. And that's the moment shedding slows. Not because hair is being forced to grow, but because the body is no longer telling it to stop. Hair loss is rarely about lack of products. It's about excess stress signals. And when you change how coffee interacts with your biology, you change the message your body sends to your hair every single morning. That's why cinnamon doesn't just make coffee healthier. It makes coffee safer for your hormones, your nervous system, and your hair. Most people who try natural remedies for hair loss don't fail because the remedy doesn't work. They fail because they use the right idea in the wrong way. Dosage, timing, form, and consistency determine whether a compound becomes medicine or noise. Cinnamon is a perfect example. Used incorrectly, it does nothing. Used correctly, it quietly changes the internal chemistry that decides whether hair survives or sheds. The first mistake most people make is using the wrong type of cinnamon. Nearly 90% of cinnamon sold worldwide is cassia cinnamon. Cassia contains high levels of coumarin, a compound shown in toxicology studies to stress the liver when consumed daily. The liver is responsible for hormone clearance, nutrient activation, and detoxification. When liver function is impaired, even mildly, estrogen, cortisol, and androgens remain in circulation longer. Research confirms that hormonal buildup increases hair follicle stress. This means the wrong cinnamon can actually worsen hair loss over time. Ceylon cinnamon, often called true cinnamon, contains only trace amounts of coumarin and has a far higher concentration of beneficial polyphenols. This is not preference, it is biochemistry. The second mistake is dosage. More is not better. Studies demonstrating cinnamon's benefits on blood sugar, inflammation, and circulation consistently use small, controlled doses, typically between a quarter and half a teaspoon per day. Exceeding this does not accelerate results. In fact, excessive intake can irritate the gut, disrupt absorption, and place unnecessary strain on detox pathways. Hair follicles respond to balance, not overload. Consistency at a biologically appropriate dose is what restores signaling pathways over time. Timing is the next critical factor. Cinnamon works best when paired with stimulation, not taken randomly. Coffee creates a hormonal and metabolic event. Cortisol rises, blood sugar shifts, blood vessels constrict. Cinnamon is most effective when it enters the body at the exact moment these changes occur. Research shows cinnamon slows gastric emptying and moderates glucose absorption when consumed alongside stimulants or carbohydrates. This is why adding cinnamon after coffee is brewed, not before, not hours later, matters. You are not adding flavor. You are intercepting a stress response in real time. Heat also matters. Excessive heat degrades cinnamon's volatile compounds, including cinnamaldehyde and eugenol. Boiling cinnamon directly in coffee destroys a significant portion of its bioactive potential. Studies on polyphenol stability confirm that prolonged high heat reduces antioxidant activity. This means sprinkling cinnamon into freshly brewed coffee preserves the compounds that improve circulation and insulin sensitivity. Small details determine whether cinnamon acts as a metabolic modulator or an inert powder. Absorption is another overlooked factor. Many of cinnamon's beneficial compounds are fat-soluble. Without fat, absorption is limited. This is why populations that traditionally consume spices with dairy or oils experience stronger physiological effects. Adding a small amount of whole milk, coconut milk, or grass-fed butter enhances bioavailability. This is not folklore. Pharmacokinetic studies consistently show improved uptake of fat-soluble polyphenols when paired with lipids. Better absorption means stronger systemic effects, and hair follicles only respond to what actually enters the bloodstream. Consistency is where the transformation happens. Hair follicles operate on delayed timelines. The average hair growth cycle spans months, not days. Shedding reflects decisions made by the body weeks earlier. This is why people quit too soon. Studies on metabolic interventions show measurable improvements in insulin sensitivity and inflammatory markers after several weeks of consistent intake. As internal stress signals drop, follicles stop exiting the growth phase. Shedding slows first. Density improves later. This delay is not failure, it is physiology. Another common mistake is expecting topical results from internal work. Cinnamon does not force hair to grow. It removes the signals that tell hair to stop growing. When cortisol remains elevated, follicles shut down regardless of topical treatments. When blood sugar is unstable, follicles miniaturize regardless of oils or serums. Internal correction always precedes visible regrowth. This is why correct use must be maintained even when results are not immediately visible. There is also a psychological component. Hair loss is perceived by the body as non-essential during stress. Survival always takes priority over appearance. By stabilizing morning cortisol, smoothing caffeine absorption, and improving glucose control, cinnamon subtly shifts the nervous system from survival mode into maintenance mode. Research in psychoneuroendocrinology confirms that reduced sympathetic activation improves regenerative processes, including hair cycling. Calm bodies grow hair, stressed bodies shed it. And here's the fact most people never hear. Hair follicles are stem cell-driven structures. Stem cells are exquisitely sensitive to oxidative stress, inflammation, and nutrient availability. Even mild daily stressors accumulate damage over time. Cinnamon's real power is not stimulation, it is protection. It shields stem cells from damage long enough for regeneration to occur. This is why its effects appear gradual but durable. This is also why skipping days matters. Intermittent use creates inconsistent signaling. The body thrives on predictability. A daily ritual tells your metabolism what to expect. When cinnamon becomes part of a routine, taken at the same time in the same way, the body adapts. Hormones stabilize. Inflammatory noise quiets. Circulation improves. Hair follicles respond not to intensity, but to rhythm. Correct use turns cinnamon into a biological signal rather than a supplement, a signal of stability, of safety, of supply. And when the body receives that signal consistently, it reallocates resources back to regeneration. Hair does not disappear overnight. It retreats when conditions turn hostile. Correct use changes those conditions, not dramatically, not aggressively, but permanently. And that is how something as simple as a quarter teaspoon, used the right way, can slowly reverse a process most people believe is irreversible. Because hair loss is not about what you apply. It's about what your body believes it can afford to grow.